how do you find a loan horse? Like, if you were going out tomorrow, how would you go and find a loan horse?
Some owners will be like, you can do X, Y, and Z. You cannot make the call on W. You can make all the calls. Like, it's just a conversation and there's no right or wrong.
This podcast is brought to you by Redwings Horse Sanctuary and Equilibrium Products.
Hello.
Hello, I'm starting this podcast so confused because Rhi's just said she's got an update for me and then said someone's name and I have no idea what she's talking about and now I'm really confused. So Rhi, give us your update. Yeah. How's your week been? How are you doing?
Well, first of all, before we got on this, we always have a little bit of a preamble. And Miri jumps on the call and she's like, so I've written notes and I've done this and and I was like, I'm really tired and I bought cereal. And Miri and I, we both use an app called Stardust, which tracks your cycle and helps you kind of track symptoms and moods and stuff. And because I have Miri on it, you can see Miri and I basically at opposite ends of our cycle at all times. So yeah. When Miri's feeling like she wants to die, I'm like, everything's fine, everything's great. And then it's the opposite, which is quite helpful when you're running a business, I suppose.
It is as well, because there have been times when Rhi and I have had these conversations and Rhi's like, I can't do it anymore. Life, corporate world is hard. Having a young horse, oh my God. Miri, I don't think we can do the podcast this week. I just don't have the time. And I'm like, Rhi, is there any possible chance that you could be approaching your period? And then she's like, yeah, that'll do it. And then we're like, oh, okay, okay, fine. That makes a lot of sense. And that's a really hard thing, right? Like, it doesn't mean you're going to cancel your whole plans and never do anything fun. But it does mean that you might be a bit nicer to yourself when you're feeling like that.
I have found it very helpful.
Yeah, and not believing those really sensationalist thoughts that are like, I can't do anything. Oh my God, everything's going wrong. Oh no, it's just my hormones. I'd love to understand why that is the thing that happens.
I was literally thinking this. I was walking home and I was like, oh, I feel a bit sad. Oh, it's probably because I'm in my luteal phase. And then I was like, why does your body make you feel like this? I understand why it makes you feel great, because it obviously wants you to procreate and feel sexy and shit. And so, we're not even 2 minutes in.
You can say shit. Shit is fine. It's the F word or the C word we don't tolerate. Okay, fine. Shit is okay.
But why then do you have to
now
feel
said
so
it
terrible?
6 times? Then why do you have to feel... What evolutionary benefit is that?
Yeah, I feel like I'm being punished, you know?
Yeah.
Being a woman sucks, you lose another egg or whatever, you know?
You wasted an egg.
Yeah, exactly.
You should be sad. You should mourn your egg loss. Yeah, weird, isn't it?
Yourself. Well, anyway, I have an update, as I said to you. Okay. So, I said her name, but that's why you were confused, because I didn't say it on the podcast. Friends, do you remember that we had a friend who asked a question about whether or not they should move from their livery yard to the sole use yard? They sent me an update and I asked if I could read it and they were like, absolutely. So,
I love this.
They said, hey, thank you so much for replying to my question. Can't tell you how many times I've listened to it. That's cute. So sorry it's taken a few days, so thank you. Just been a bit manic. Have decided to go for it. Handed in my notice on my current yard and my friend is definitely coming along too. She's bringing her semi-retired cob and she has got her daughter's first pony back from her lone home. She's been outgrown. So she's bringing her too. There will be a herd of 3. Feels like this is definitely the right decision, and if it doesn't work out, we will just put the shoes back on. I love that that's become a phrase.
I love that that's become a phrase.
We're moving at the end of the month, so lots to organise, but in a good way. Thank you again for the advice. P.S. I've already ordered the kettle, just need the deck chairs.
Oh, what a dream.
How cute is that?
Oh, I love this. I hope she updates us again. Yeah, let's go with her. That sounds so nice. Maybe we should... No, maybe we don't need to go and visit people. That might be weird.
Imagine you turning up with your 4 or 5 mares. How many horses do you have now?
7.
7? Yeah. Miri.
What do you want me to do with them? I tell you what, we might get to talk about retired horses today.
Yeah.
That's a good plan. We're going to talk a bit. We've got 1, maybe 2 topics to talk about today. And we wanted to talk... We've had a lot of questions and stuff about loaning horses, getting into horses when you're older as well. So that was topic 1. But then we've also talked a lot about we had a lot of questions about older horses and our take on it, I guess. So we're going to talk about maybe old people and old horses.
Yes. Oh, I just have one more update. Just serendipitously, the Kelly J Leather, who I bought my bespoke bridle off, she listens to the podcast and she just messaged me saying, neats for oil is bad for stitches. Glycerin just makes leather sticky. So there you go. I was talking about how I was trying to avoid glycerin. There you go.
Oh, that's just reminded me, actually. I went to the tack shop yesterday and failed to buy tack soap. We needed tack soap and I didn't manage it. I seem to have something that I like to call tack shop amnesia, where I will formulate a list in my head and then I'll walk into the tack shop and it's like in Severance when their brain disconnects and they walk into the tack shop and it's like every piece of information falls out. I think it's because it's quite overstimulating maybe. It's a lot of stuff. Yeah. I can never remember. So like loads of times I'll have gone to the tack shop like, right, I need this. Fail completely, dismal, end up with like a chocolate bar and a new pair of gloves. I did treat myself to some new gloves yesterday.
Your gloves were atrocious.
I've had those for many, many years. I work very hard. They work hard with me. But yes, atrocious, thank you. Appreciate it. The number of messages I get on Instagram, they're like, Miri, can you just buy some new gloves? I had one lady, this lovely lady Gemma, she was like, I'm so glad you bought some new gloves. I was about to start a GoFundMe.
Stop it.
But I don't know, I just really like to use them until they are literally no longer gloves.
I get that. They're comfortable. It was also your birthday.
It was, yesterday.
Did you have a nice birthday?
Yeah. So, my little update from this week is that turns out resting is actually quite a hard thing for your body to relearn how to do once you've basically given up resting. So like I've been going through this whole like burnout, anxiety, hormonal thing for like a year. And we went to a spa on Friday, which was so lovely, and I had a massage. And it was actually one of the most relaxing massages I've ever had. It felt like, it was like something out of a film. Like at one point she like put a rose quartz eye mask on me that was like heavy and cold and then rubbed my feet for 5 minutes. And I was like, wow, this is actually so lovely. But the difficulty is when you've been like a tightly coiled spring for my whole life, don't know how long it's been, when that spring gets unwound, it can feel very unsafe for your body.
Yeah, I get that.
And so I basically then experienced some not very pleasant anxiety for the following couple of days. And it sort of rolled into my birthday a bit, and I just woke up feeling quite like cortisol-y on Tuesday morning, which is, yeah, not the nicest, but it's also just really interesting, like, becoming super aware of this. Like I don't think I noticed it before, and now I really notice it, and that's hard but also very good, because what I noticed was like yesterday I woke up not feeling so good, but it was almost like the tail end of the anxious like moment as such. Like it became anxiety started to subside, and then I got really tired. So yesterday I felt really tired, and like I know when I'm like that to not try and do hard things with Blondie. She's like
interesting. She's your barometer.
She's my barometer. And
she's your ballast.
She's my what?
Your ballast.
Like my
You're
balancer.
my ballast mark.
Oh, I've not heard this. What's this?
Oh, it's from a show. It's from Peep Show. She goes,
okay.
"You're my ballast mark." It's an insult in that context. Because she's saying that he like weighs her down, but I just meant she's the like cornerstone, your ballast.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
she is. And I went and had a moment with her. I thought I could ride her, but I didn't. I said I thought I'd just have a moment with her. And actually, no, this was on Monday, not Tuesday. Sorry, I'm getting my days muddled up. But the weather had changed, and I thought exercising Blondie today is not going to be the best thing. And I just went and spent some time with her and did some grooming with her and did some crying, which was interesting. Just cried. And then started to feel better. And then today, like you've noticed, I'm feeling quite bouncy again. So just learning to really love my dysregulated parts. Not try and push them away. That's my motto at the moment, is I love this dysregulated part of me. It needs to be heard and seen and cared for, and then I'll start to feel better again, and that's okay.
I also went to Clear Round with Harley.
Oh my God, I completely wanted to ask you how Harley was. So this was off the property, right?
Yeah, so I've jumped him off the property before. Obviously, I jumped him at camp and I've taken him to arena hire, but I've never jumped him away from home in a scenario where there were like lots of riders around and like a competition atmosphere.
Show atmosphere,
Exactly.
yeah.
And so I went to Felbridge, which is a lovely venue, but they had 4 arenas running on the day. So they had they had the BSJA and the BSJ warm up together, and then they had Clear Round and the Clear Round warm up, which is what I was doing. And I got there and I was really quite nervous. I was shaking a bit when I was tacking up, actually.
That's
I
tough.
know. And I tried, this is how I know that Premier Performance Human Calm works, right? Because I had Rescue Remedy with me and I'd been taking it and doing the drops on my tongue. Didn't do anything. Literally didn't do anything. And that's how I know it's not a placebo, because I actually do get nervous. And like, if the product doesn't work, the product doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I wish I'd had some Human Calm. But he was amazing. He travelled really well. We went in the warm-up. And I was super proud of him and me, actually, because I went in there and I was a little bit nervous and there were these 2 girls, and so I put him on a circle because I was like, just help him settle, because he did like quite a big spook when I got in there, and my friend was like, hey, just watch him, he's a bit younger, you know, this is quite a new thing for him. And they were like really lovely, the girls were so nice. And so I just like made a joke. There were a few people standing around and I was like, it's our first Clear Round away from home. And I was like, and I'm shitting myself, but I'm not allowed to say that because only one of us is allowed to be worried. And everyone laughed, and then I laughed. And that, you know, things like that are quite helpful, right?
Yeah.
So, yes.
That's really cool. And that's really interesting, actually, because I think as well it shows how much Harley has grown. Because before, if you had been feeling 70% good,
yes,
he'd have been like, no, I'm down, I'm out, sorry,
100%.
This is too much. But because he's feeling 70% good or 90% good or whatever, he is allowing for that little bit. And that's
You're
where
so
those
right.
like that again, the word awareness comes in, like acknowledging he's actually doing much better, so now I can do slightly harder things because he's going to be able, you know, you filled up that confidence jar so well that now he's able to cope when you're maybe feeling a little bit over your limit.
You're so right, because I did worry about that. I thought, I can't get rid of this in my body just yet, and I know he's going to feel it. And I got on and he was just like, he was a little bit up. He was kind of like, what are we doing? Something's happening. Mummy feels different, but it's okay, circle, fine. And then the 2 girls left the warm-up and I thought, okay, this might be hard. And he was amazing. We jumped a couple of things. First round was not, well, it was okay. It was sticky because I was like too scared to canter because he can get a bit sticky and a bit looky before fences and kind of do a bit of a jerky stop and like have a look at stuff. So then I get scared of cantering because I feel like if I put more power in, it's going to make the stop bigger, which it never does. But
it's
in my
head,
it's the opposite, 100% the opposite. So the first round we kind of jumped about and stuck around, and that's the point of doing cross poles, is that you can just walk over them. And I just took my time and let him look at stuff. And I said to myself before I went in, like, if it goes really wrong at the start and he is struggling, I was like, phone a friend, bring one of the girls in that you've now made friends with, get a lead over the fence, job's a good one. So I get to the end of my first round, my friend who stood by the gate, she goes, I think you just need a little bit more impulsion. She was like, just be brave. She was like, just try the canter. Just see what happens. And I was like, you're right, I'm going to do it. Popped into canter, he was amazing.
Great.
He was so good. And everyone was so supportive. Like, I came out afterwards and this woman was like, you did so well. He's so cool. Like that. He was like, the difference between the first round and the second round, he was like, he's amazing. And I was like, thanks. Yeah, it was lovely.
Don't we love a little bit of shared responsibility?
I know, it was so nice. Everyone was lovely. We had a very nice time.
You know what? I think that was actually a bigger deal than you think it is, because if there was a BS show going on, the reason they run Clear Round is so that the people who are jumping the BS show can warm up around the Clear Round. So they've started, one of our local venues, they now do a Clear Round before the classes. So they do like an 80 centimetre Clear Round. I managed to jump it a few times last year on Little Bell. But it's to help people, and so I think the atmosphere would have been a proper show. So look at you.
I was so proud of him because he didn't have his ears on, and I'm really trying to get to a point where I don't need to use them unless things are going to be really difficult for him. But he's really noise reactive, and the bells going off in the BSJA class like every few minutes obviously to tell people to start, and they're calling to one another. And this arena, if you've ever been to Felbridge, it's quite a big arena. There's fillers everywhere. Even on the cross poles, they put the planks underneath. There's a big lake in the middle. You've got a cafe. Like, there's a lot. And actually, as he walked in, the little pony that had come out walked up and away. And so there was no horses near the gate. And I was just really proud of him.
And there was something that you said then, that he's really noise sensitive. And I think what it is will be, if you imagine the bucket of stress, when his stress level is naturally lower because he's more mature, he's more educated, everything is easier, his gut is more in balance, whatever it will be, he's then less noise sensitive.
Yeah.
So like when a horse is already at their limit, then noise is then that one thing, and we're like, oh, they're noise sensitive. The reality is, when he's noise sensitive, he's just closer to his limit of, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So like, yes, it is the thing that shows up for you and him, but potentially it could be, another horse leaving. It could be, I don't know, whatever it might be. Or it could be like they become really sensitive to your leg at that point. Like they come like prickly against your leg, and it's acknowledging like, okay, where are we at on that level to then know what they're going to be able to cope with and how we can help them. Interesting. Food for thought.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Love that. Well done. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be asking you a fair amount of questions for this topic today because I've never loaned a horse.
Well, we can switch because you'll know about my retiring horses than I will.
Yeah.
So, I guess a definition. So, part loaning horses and sharing horses are the same thing.
Yes.
And it just means... I was like, maybe I'm wrong. No, it means the same thing. And it is basically where you have an agreement with an owner where you ride a horse a couple of times a week or up to a number of times a week, but not a full loan. And it's a kind of a halfway between having riding lessons where you're learning the riding side of having a horse, and either owning a horse yourself or full loaning a horse where you're completely responsible for all of that horse's costs, care, vets, all the things. And so a lot of people, including myself, have used part loaning as a stepping stone from going from riding school to a full ownership to see how they cope. Or for someone who's like, I don't have the funds or the time or the inclination to own a horse, but I want to do more than just ride. I'd like to have a relationship with a horse, blah, 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 blah. So
and
that's sort of what it is.
It will also depend, won't it, on what the owner wants. As such. So sometimes you'll maybe start part loaning a horse and then you'll start loaning them fully. And it might be that, there is it's horses for courses in this moment, isn't it? And I think this is important to say at the beginning. Like we'll help give you some maybe our experience or, some helpful advice if you're thinking about it. But every circumstance is going to be different. Mm-hmm. Every yard will have different rules. Every owner will have different wants or needs, or horse will have wants and needs. So although we'll be able to give you mainly your experience on this, pinch of salt required, I think. Yeah.
I mean, I've had a few different scenarios. Like I've part loaned horses from riding schools, which is something that some riding schools do. And it allows you to step up from lessons and do a bit more with horse care and maybe take that horse out to competitions and things. But you've still got the safety net of people around you for care and injuries. Because a lot of people find the step up from lessons to part loaning scary because they're afraid that they'll miss something in the care. And so
we had that question, didn't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. About doing it, which is why doing it on a riding school can be really helpful because you've always got somebody there. I've had other scenarios where I part loaned a horse. This is when I was much younger, to be fair, and I paid for his shoes and I got to ride him kind of whenever I wanted because his owners were just an old couple. He was called Otto. He was really cute. Yeah, he was sweet. And then I've done a part loan which turned into a full loan. I've had a part loan which then the owners were like, do you want to buy them? And they weren't the right horse and it wasn't the right time actually. So it was a no. But there's lots of different scenarios.
I think often one thing that is relevant and that you hear about is that like sharing and loaning is often because the person who owns the horse needs to reduce their responsibility.
Yes.
And it's a way that they can keep control of said horse because it's important to them, because maybe their work is changing or whatever it might be, but the horse has some individual needs and they don't want to sell them because it wouldn't be ethical to sell them. They still have a lovely life as a ridden horse or whatever it might be, but it's not like they wouldn't feel comfortable selling them. So in loaning them or part loaning them, you're actually helping. I think that's quite common, isn't it? Was that a situation for you, like with Otto? You were helping them out, right? By riding him?
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, they were kind of very relaxed about the whole thing. So they were just kind of like, do what you want. And I think they just liked having someone around doing things with him. Because he used to be ridden by the older lady, but he was quite nappy and he had quite a big rear in him. Which settled down a little bit after a while. I think he was just, we would say now that he was probably quite anxious of being on his own, which is fair. But yeah, so she sort of stopped riding him because of that. But yeah, there was other horses that I've loaned because the owners got really busy with work or young children and they still want to ride their horse, or they still want to compete but they need help keeping that horse fit, or they feel like they want to give that horse a bit more attention, or like whatever it is. And I've thought, you know, if I ever was going to have children, like, would I ever let somebody on my yard ride Harley and part loan for a bit? Because often as well, people don't want to move their horse. So they don't want to put them on full loan because that would mean sometimes that they move yards. So they put them on part loan instead so that they're still, like you said, there's control over it.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, I've heard some pretty scary stories of horses going out on loan and being sold and all sorts of things. Crazy. So I think we should, I've written some notes to ask you, because you're the person that's going to be able to answer this, because also you are the most conscious person of like making sure things are watertight that I know. So my first question to you is, how do you find a loan horse? Like if you were going out tomorrow, how would you go and find a loan horse?
So local Facebook groups is a really good way. Word of mouth is good, particularly like instructors and coaches. They often have a network of people and they know what people are looking for. But local Facebook groups is good. Like I have in the past put like adverts out of myself, and people do this quite often now actually. They'll be like, hey, I'm X years old, I'm this tall, I weigh this much, I've got this many years riding experience, I'm looking for XYZ. And then some pictures of you riding, and people will say, hey, I have a horse in wherever. And so when I last looked for a loan horse, this was when Woody was rehabbing and I wanted to get back into riding in preparation for him coming back into work. I put a post out and I ended up going to see a few different horses to try. And this is also, that's a piece of the pie of like going to try horses to loan and just seeing what feels right. Because sometimes you go and you have to vibe with the owner a bit because you're going to be engaging with them a lot, and it can be a very sensitive thing. And like, so you want to make sure that you have a good relationship with them.
Sometimes people are absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, people can get quite specific about their care, and that can be hard. But also, and this is down to you really, but some horses, I tried a couple where I thought they were giving pain signals.
Yeah.
And I was like, this isn't comfortable. And I didn't say that to the owner because sometimes it doesn't feel appropriate or comfortable.
Well, also, if they didn't ask that, it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, they were like, if they're not like when you're riding around the horse bucks in canter only on the right rein, and they say, oh yeah, he's been doing that a little bit, I don't know quite why that is. That would be your opportunity to be like, oh, well, maybe it's pain.
Yes.
But if they're just like, oh yeah, he does that.
Yeah. And I've done it before where I've like gently probed, and then it's clear that they either don't want to talk about that. So I think that's something to be aware of like, how does it make you feel? And
I think that's also a really hard thing with loaning horses is you aren't fully autonomous.
Yep.
We've had this conversation a few times. I have this conversation a lot with people. I'm leasing, I'm loaning, I share this, that and the other, and I have real concerns. But when I go to broach the subject, it's not met with open arms. And I think that's a big, difficult thing, you know. a excuse me, a lot of horse owners are a little bit in denial because we don't want to know that there's something wrong because it's really heartbreaking. And there's a phrase that I always say to people when I have these difficult conversations where people are like, I think there might be something wrong, I'm so scared. And I always say to people, look, we may not find out what we want to know, but we'll always find out what we need to know.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you are loaning a horse and you are in that situation and the horse is not performing, it feels crap, it's really struggling with something, it's grumpy to tack up, whatever it might be, I think sometimes the way that it's approached is the way that you have to go in to it. You know, like maybe saying something like, Susan, I'm really concerned. I was tacking up Bonnie this week and she just didn't feel happy about her wearing her tack. Would you be open to us trying to find out why?
Yeah.
You know, would you be open? Like, it's literally using the word open. Like, it's not saying we have to call the vet tomorrow. This is da 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 da. It's kind of, it's tricky. It's definitely
delicate.
Tricky.
Yeah. Yeah,
I know of people that have walked away from situations because they weren't able to help, and it could be quite damaging to your mental health if you're in a situation where you're being asked to do something that doesn't feel comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I've had both ways. I've had ones where I've said, hey, would you feel comfortable if I got the dentist? Would you feel comfortable if I got the physio? I'm just, you know, and you can couch it in like, I'm upping his work a little bit and I just feel like it might be a nice thing to make sure that everything's cool and okay. Or you can say, hey, you know, we've been jumping a bit more, or we've been doing a bit more. I just want to make sure he's comfortable. Is that okay with you? Like, you know, it depends how you have a relationship with the owner, which is why it's important that you're comfortable with them, I suppose, before you start.
I think that maybe that's a place for it. It's the before you start part. Like, if you are, like, obviously, I wouldn't suggest going and starting to loan a horse that is evidently unsound or evidently showing really big pain behaviours. But potentially in that moment when you're starting to talk about having a contract, and that's something that we need to discuss, isn't it? Because it's very important. You would say, what would happen if there was an instance where I felt the horse needed veterinary care or veterinary intervention or investigation or something? What would happen in that moment?
Yeah.
And if they say, oh, we'd cross that bridge when we come to it, great, perfect, door is open, there we are. And it's just all of these things, isn't it? Foresight is a wonderful thing, and hopefully we can offer people a little bit of it to help them.
I mean, contract is very important, and it can feel awkward, but I promise you, nothing will be more awkward than not having had those conversations and then being emotionally involved with the horse and owner and it all getting a bit awkward. So, like, I think when I've done contracts before, BHS does like
I was going to ask you where
standard
you got them from.
one.
Yeah.
And I just adapted it a bit with my kind of corporate hat on and was just like, we basically sat down for a cup of tea and we were like, and I've done it with a few owners now where I've been like, okay, is there anything that's mandatory for you? Like, he always needs boots on at this time. He always needs to be led in a bridle, like mandatories that are really important to the owner. And I always framed that conversation through the lens of like, how do I make this as comfortable as possible for you and how you want your horse set up? Because ultimately it is theirs. But it also allows you to ask questions that could be conceived as difficult without it being difficult.
Yeah.
And to your point, you're like, okay, let's imagine a scenario where you're on holiday, catastrophic field injury happens or something awful. Do I have permission to call the vet? Do I have permission to da-da-da-da? Do I have permission to da-da-da-da? And, you know, and some owners will be like, you can do X, Y, and Z. You cannot make the call on W. You can make all the calls. Like, it's just a conversation and there's no right or wrong, but it will help you get a sense of like who this kind of owner is, which I think is helpful.
I think also like in that moment, like before, because that obviously comes very comfortably to you, but maybe maybe not comfortably, but it's something that you're used to doing.
I can put my corporate hat on and be like, yeah, contract.
Right, let's get this laid out. And I think that if it doesn't come easily to you, it's making sure that you spend some time writing stuff down, like possible scenarios that you need to discuss, things like what you've just suggested, like are there any non-negotiables for you? Like, and I've got a client at the moment and they have a pony that is part loaned and they're not very comfortable with some of the things that are going on with the pony, but because it wasn't pre-discussed, it's then very difficult because you can say, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do X, Y, or Z. But if it's not written down and there's nothing, it's not organised, I suppose it's harder then to be like, what do you mean? It would be then harder to terminate the contract as such, because they're not really in breach of anything. They're just doing something you don't like.
As an owner, you have full rights to end a contract whenever you want, with notice, but like, it's your horse at the end of the day. So that should never be something that you feel really cut up by. And similarly with as a part loaner, you can end your contract. You may have a 30-day period, or you may have to pay until a point, or you need to take care of that horse if you're on DIY, for example, for a certain amount of time. But you can also leave whenever you want. I remember I was loaning a horse once, and they were the nicest owners. They really, really were, and I really liked the horse. But there was a point in the loan where they moved yards, and the horse's turnout drastically changed and reduced. And I remember I'd driven a really long way to get there. It was like -2. And I was in the school, and he was quite a big horse. And I was in the school, and he just he just didn't want to be there. And it was really uncomfortable, and it had been chipping away at my confidence a little bit. And I remember standing in the middle of this arena being like, what am I doing? It's -2. This is quite scary. He doesn't want to be here. I can't make this better. It's not helping my confidence. And I think I didn't think I ended it that day, but I think I certainly, I think I had a conversation where I was like, I think I may have spoken to my coach, and been like, I'm not sure.
I think we spoke about it too.
We probably did.
I do remember it.
Yeah.
Because I think I remember saying, oh, how is that benefiting you?
Yes. And I think I was just honest with the owners in the end, and was like, I'm not sure. Because they knew I was having a little bit of trouble, because I was really honest with them. If I had a bad ride, I'd be like, hey, this happened, I'm not sure. And there were a couple of times where they came down, and we were there together, and it was quite nice and stuff, and they were really good about it, to be fair. But I think I just ended the loan and was like, I just don't think it's giving me what I need it to, and I'm not sure I'm the person for him, kind of thing. But yeah.
Do you have insurance when you take out a loan? Take out a loan, that's not what I mean.
Yeah, great question. You really want to get third-party insurance minimum. You probably want, most loans actually, not most, but most people will say you should get rider insurance as well. I would absolutely recommend that. You want third-party liability, because if you're out on that horse and something happens, it's your fault, kind of thing. But that's not the legal the way to say it. But you want third-party, and you probably want rider insurance too, just to cover yourself.
That's interesting. And that would be something that you would pay for?
Yep. Yeah, you would just pay for it. And it's not expensive. It's like £5 to £12 a month, depending on who your policy's with.
Oh, really? That's very affordable.
Yeah, it's not too much rider insurance. And the cost of part loan as well really varies, but generally what I've seen is you start at a base of £10 a ride. So usually for DIY, the more chores you're having to do, the cheaper the loan itself. So if you're on DIY and you're doing muck outs, the morning, for example, and you're doing the muck out, the feed, whatever, then your loan might be £10. If you're part loaning a horse who's on full livery and you're not having to do any chores, your loan might be £25 a ride or £20 a ride, whatever. It's also impacted sometimes by the quote unquote quality, I say that loosely, of the horse. So are you able to school, hack, compete? Are you just able to go hacking? So that can sometimes affect as well. If you're part loaning a schoolmaster who can teach you elementary, you might pay a little bit more for that versus, a horse that you just hack.
You may also pay a lot more for that and lease a horse.
Yes, which I don't have experience with. It's very common in the US, isn't it, leasing?
Yeah, leasing is, and actually it's becoming much more common in the UK. I know of a lot of circumstances where horses are leased, and you can, pay upward of £1,000 a month. Really.
And these are horses that are very good at their jobs, quote unquote,
Absolutely.
professionals.
So and this is the thing to remember, is if you are paying, because sometimes the people are like, well, I'm helping out, I'm looking after that horse. Yes, but you are also benefiting from that, because you're not having to purchase a horse. Pay for all of the cost for that horse, especially with sharing. I think that, or part loaning, this is something that is you know, you see people talking about it on the groups, like, I can't believe they asked me to pay this much. And I'm thinking, well, you're gaining the benefit of, A, riding a horse, which is an expensive thing. So I've got 7. I know how expensive it is. I did some maths the other day, actually, to work out exactly how much my horses cost me. I don't want to talk about it. Absolutely vomit-inducing. And I wouldn't ever have it any other way, but it is a lot of money. And then... You know, to have a horse that is of real value, you got to pay for that. Because otherwise, if you want to go and buy that horse, it's probably going to cost you £30,000.
Well, yes, and it's also worth, actually, while we're on the subject of money, it's worth understanding the differences and then a little bit of a nuance around financial gain. So part loaning, you usually pay either per day that you have that horse. So let's say you have the horse twice a week, every week. £10 a day, that's maths, £80 a month. That took me way longer than it should have.
Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't even trying to work it out, so I was just looking at you like, what?
We can't be good at everything, okay?
No, it's quite late. We're quite tired.
It is quite late. Or some people do it of like, they'll give you a percentage of delivery cost. So if you have the horse 2 to 3 days a week, you pay 30% of delivery or whatever, 30% of that horse's cost. Then full loan is where you're not paying for the horse themselves, but you're paying for all of the costs associated with that horse. As if you had bought them, only you don't have the upfront costs of buying the horse. So you'd pay all the livery, insurance, feed, bedding, all the associated costs. Leasing is where you would pay all the associated costs with keeping that horse, livery, feed, bedding, all the things, plus a fee to have the privilege of riding that particular horse.
Yeah.
Now, there's a little bit of and I don't know the ins and outs of it legally, but there is a little bit of a debate sometimes around part loaning because of financial gain, because insurance for horses, there's different types of insurance, and you can't technically put your horse on part loan and be like gaining financially from that horse. Like, it's a different kind of insurance, I suppose. It's a bit like riding schools perhaps. And so with part loaning, really the cost that you're paying for, the way people get around this sometimes is that they'll pay for a specific part of the horse's cost. Like, they will pay the feed and the shoes. So it's not a profit thing. Mm-hmm. So that's just something to be aware of. And like I said, you'll probably need to do some research because I don't know the ins and outs, but I know that level is a thing.
That's very interesting. Mm-hmm. Because I think as well, like, there is also something that I struggle with it is quite often it is of benefit to the owner of the horse for the horse to go on loan or be shared potentially. And this is just me making awareness of it. I don't know whether this is of any help at all, but like, you might be improving that horse, and how does that end up? Do you know what I mean? Like,
it's tricky.
You're gaining, of course, because you're gaining the experience of having this lovely horse, but if you're actually improving that horse, it is important that if you are a capable rider, it's actually happened recently to somebody that I know, very competent rider, loaning a horse, owner stepped back and back and back and back. Horse improved. Horse owner decides, I'm going to sell this horse.
Yeah.
Person who's been loaning the horse did not get a penny, got hurt, wasn't even involved in the sale of the horse, so she also had the emotional implication of that. Where does that leave you? That's very difficult, right?
Unfortunately, this happens more often than you'd think. I heard this story a lot, and in the end, actually, it wasn't the reason I ended up getting my own horse. There were lots of reasons, but one of them was like this idea that you can put so much effort into a horse and ultimately they're not yours. And financially that's challenging, emotionally that's challenging, but also there's something around the control of, like, as you said, a horse's comfortability. And I think I got to a point where I was like, I just can't do this. Like, I just need to be in control. I know the way that I want to keep a horse, and I want to keep them like this. And also, you know, my personal life, things changed, my career changed, and it meant that I was in a position where I could afford a horse. And I appreciate that some people are like, well, I'm never going to be in that position. But it is hard. Like, I think you either have to, and actually, I changed the way that I thought about part loaning a little bit after I had Woody. So instead of getting quite so emotionally invested. I still did all the things I loved. I still put the money into the horse in the right way, physio, etc. But I did slightly change my relationship with that horse when I part loaned after owning my own, because it is really hard otherwise, because you have no control over whether that horse stays, goes, is sold. And people do sometimes, when they have been on loan, think, oh yeah, actually, I don't want them back, and actually they're in a really good place right now, I'm going to sell them. And sometimes you have a fairy tale ending and they'll say to the loaner, hey, do you want to buy this horse? That happened to me with one of the horses that I loaned. And it goes well, but sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of a, what's the phrase? It's collateral no. It's like a risk of doing it.
Yeah. I think contracting is important in this moment.
Yeah.
You know, if you feel like, it's maybe different with like a really old pony or something, you know, for a kid, and they're just going to loan it, but it might be worth just having an understanding at that early stage when you're sorting out the contract with the owner. What's your long-term, what do you think, you know, what are your long-term plans? Are you thinking that I'm going to loan this horse for a long time? Is there the possibility that you'll get to the point where you'd like to sell the horse? What's the kind of what's the vibe check on it? Because you can get a lot from someone's response, right? If they're like, oh no, you know, he's with us forever and we're never going to sell him, but my kid's outgrown him and we just want someone to love him, that's one answer. But if they're like, oh yeah, well, I don't really know at the moment and I just think that we'll see how we go, maybe put a clause in there that if they want to sell them, that you get first refusal. If they want to sell them, that you would get a percentage of the sale potentially, if you're planning on now investing the next 6 months, a year of your life into it.
It's hard though, isn't it? Can you like, because God, that, I mean, that's quite a I think it's great, but it is quite a ballsy thing to do, because as an owner I'd probably be like,
yeah, but
you're not getting a percentage of that sale.
This pisses me off.
I know. I think I'm playing devil's advocate, but I'm also like,
yeah,
I'd be like, what?
If you are a capable rider and you are going to be bringing value to that horse, you must know your worth. And this is where the horse world is a bit like, oh, well, just riding horses is a privilege and you should just, you know, enjoy it and have a lovely time. No, damn well need to get paid for that. And I see it situational where people are loaning a horse because they don't have the financial means to purchase a horse, but really they should be being paid to ride that horse.
Well, and that's where the line gets muddled. And I think you need to decide for yourself, like, do I want to really go for this and be like, I'm going to get paid to ride horses, or am I comfortable with loaning but potentially not getting, you know, because it's very possible.
Loaning, but being ballsy enough that at the beginning you turn up and you say, I'm definitely going to be adding some value to this horse. I know my worth. I've got a great coach. I look forward to making some improvements. This is my thing. I
definitely think it's an easier conversation if you say, hey, I'm riding at elementary and I'm having lessons with Carl Hester every week and I'm going to take your horse for those lessons.
Yeah.
If you sell this horse, I would like to talk about percentage. I think you're in a much safer position doing it that way, or stronger position, not safer, than, you know, me, for example, being like, hey, I can sort of ride prelim and, you know, I would like a percentage of the sale.
I think I know what inside leg and outside rein means.
Exactly.
I might improve them a little bit. No, of course. Yeah. And look, this is nuanced and it's complicated and it's one of those things, but I think obviously don't go with a hugely inflated ego. That's not what I'm encouraging. But if there are those people, like the person I spoke to recently, or who sent us a message, I think, you know, they were adding a lot of value to the situation that they were in. I don't know whether maybe this didn't make it onto the podcast, but it was because of a conversation. There was a conversation that we had about this situation before, and somebody sent me a message and they said, oh, you know, maybe it was a consultation call. I can't remember what it was, but they said, you know, I'm riding this horse and I'm doing this, this and this, but I'm very aware that maybe I should be getting paid, sort of situation. It's complicated, right?
It is complicated. And it's individual, you know. It's hard.
Yeah, for sure. As somebody who got into horses later in life as such, as in because you didn't just have ponies all your life, that were, you know, it wasn't like generational equestrianism in your household. Yeah. What advice would you have for somebody who is maybe looking to get into things later in life? Because I think this ties in very well, because I suppose part loaning is one of the routes, I guess. So yeah, as someone who has got into it later, what's your best advice?
I definitely think finding a good riding school, if you can, is really nice, because it will just give you a bit of an anchor and give you the chance to try and, you know, ride every week, get it into your routine, see how that feels. From a financial point of view, from a time point of view, you might also find that you love the idea of riding horses, but actually you don't love riding horses. Like, that also happens. So starting there is good, and it can start to help you build a mini network, because you'll get access to instructors that you won't have had before. You might start to make situational friendships, which is super helpful. And so as you build confidence on and off the horse, you can then start to be like, maybe you have lessons with a coach and you're like, hey, Sally, at the end of your lesson, you're like, I think I'm ready for the next step. Do you know any part loans that are going either here or elsewhere? And it can just help you build. I think that's finding your people is really helpful. And then from there, just a coach, just super helpful. Because then you don't feel so on your own. Yeah,
I wanted to say something on the finding your people, just as a complete sidebar. But do you remember we talked about this in our last episode? We talked about like community and wonderful things, and I received the loveliest message. This literally made my heart sing. I'm going to leave out the location just in case they didn't want me to say that, because I realised I didn't ask actually for permission for this, but the bare bones are still very relevant. Hi Miri, hope you're well. I'm still loving the podcast, and having just listened to the newest one, wanted to ping you a message before I forgot about it. I hope that's okay. I live in a very horsey area, which I think is really interesting to note. Like, this person doesn't live in like a sparse area of horses. There's loads of horse people. But it's incredibly traditionally horsey, and as a person who does relationship-based horsemanship, I'm literally on an island on my own with one or two others near me on their own little islands too. What's been amazing recently is that I've joined a wonderful group of ladies locally who all feel the same, who have set up an alternative riding club that's exactly like you and Rhi were talking about in the podcast. We are a small group of equestrians who don't fit the norm, who have formed a support group where we share advice, chat horses, and attend semi-regular meetups with small demos. Oh my god. This. I just think that is the power of social media, because those people probably will have connected through social media in some way, and I just think social media can be a really toxic, unpleasant place, but it actually can be really wonderful and help people who previously felt really isolated really feel part of something, and I think that's really cool. So
I really like that.
Going back to getting into horses when you're older, for sure finding people to do it with is going to be a big part of that, like that community of a riding school. I remember when I was a kid, because I learnt to ride in a riding school, and then I had my first pony at the riding school, like I kept him there. And like the coaches, so like the people who had literally taught me to ride, then were teaching me on my own horse. Yeah. And so that like follow on is super relevant.
I talked earlier about taking Harley for clear round away from home for the first time, and when I did, I put him in the Equilibrium Tri-Zone Impact Sport boots. These are the same boots that I had him in for cross country a couple of weeks ago. I have this really beautiful, it's like a bottle green, it just looks gorgeous. But beyond looking gorgeous, they are actually fantastic boots. They protect from concussion and penetration injuries, and they've been tested to protect if the horse was to hit a solid fence or strike itself. They're super lightweight and breathable, so even though they have all of that protection, you're not compromising on weight, and they'll still keep the legs cool, which is really important for preventing injury to tendons and ligaments. As always with Equilibrium, these have been developed using the latest research and independently tested. So to learn more about these boots or any of the Equilibrium products, head to the link in our show notes.
I went for a hack for an hour, and Zora did not have, like, her legs were not warm in any way at all.
They're amazing.
They really are clever, and I just think, modern technology for the win.
Yep, they really are great. I love them so much. I guess the other thing about coming to it as an adult is that as an adult, your kind of bullshit-ometer is good, and you are hopefully more confident than you are as a teenager. And the horse world can be a horrible place. Like, people are, not always, but it can be quite a manipulative environment. People can be kind of bullies and not very kind. And so coming into it as an adult, like, trust your gut. If the yard feels wrong, you don't have to be there. If an instructor is making you feel uncomfortable or upset, you don't have to work with them. If the owner is not listening, or you go to try a horse to loan and you don't get a good vibe, or you're like, I'm not sure about this, trust your gut, because you're probably right, and you can't save every horse. And so getting emotionally entangled for the sake of a horse, you're probably not going to be able to change the outcome. So I think as an adult, like, sometimes it's about cutting your losses, or being that person who sits in the middle of the arena when it's -2 and goes, what am I doing this for? I'm too old for this. Like, so I think that actually is a real benefit of coming to it later, that you don't get as a child, because you kind of become indoctrinated into like unacceptable behaviour. And so you stick with stuff longer than you would as an adult. Yeah.
I think, though, there is something to... I'm going to counter you a little bit, and that's why we're good for each other, isn't it? Because actually there'll be some people listening to this that's like, oh no, but I don't know my gut, or I don't have loads of confidence. And something that is definitely important to acknowledge, there's few things I wrote down, is to be really humble if you're coming to this later in life. Like, really acknowledge where you really are, because especially if you've had children, women's confidence after they've had children is really changed. And this is because your priorities are very, very different. I have taught so many women who have come back to horses, or gone off and had a baby and then come back, and they're like, I do not know where my confidence went, but it's no longer here. So being really humble with how you really are is really important, and being able to say, I'm coming to this later in life, I'm really keen, but I'm really nervous, can be quite a hard thing, but a really important thing, because it's going to allow people to really help you with where you truly are at. I have some lovely ladies on my yard that are 50, and, or not even 50, not necessarily, but middle-aged, post-children age. And one thing that they've always said is that I've always made them feel very safe to be honest. And it's lovely, right? And safe to say that they feel scared, and safe to say that they are nervous today. And I've always encouraged that real honesty. And I think that if you can harbour that in yourself, or encourage that within yourself to be really honest, I think that can be really helpful to help everything feel a little more at ease. Because otherwise it can feel, like you say, if you're not confident, it can feel a bit complicated, I think. And knowing what you need at the time in terms of that part loaning horse is super important, right? Yeah. Because if you're not feeling very confident and you know that you want to get started, then loan an older horse, something that is really established and steady,
Let them look after you. Yeah, there's a difference between pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone and, from an athlete and sporting point of view, and being frightened and, feeling out of your depth. Like, ultimately these are big animals, and especially if you're an adult, you're just not as brave as children. Gosh, like the things I used to jump and things, my God, I wouldn't jump any of that now.
Me, 100%. I used to jump 140s. Like, I'm a professional rider. Still am a professional rider. And I do... no thanks. No. Well, not no thanks, but I need to be in the right situation with the right horse. And confidence is fragile. And I think as you're getting older, or especially for women go through another hormonal shift.
Yes.
And that can be really detrimental. Perimenopause and the menopause can cause a huge shift for women in terms of how their hormones feel.
In season 1, we had Maeve Sheridan, who runs Activate Your Seat, on doing a fitness episode, and she, towards the end of that episode, talked about menopause and perimenopause, and it was very interesting actually hearing her perspective on it.
Definitely, because it's super valuable, and it's like, it's super valuable because it's super important. And if you are going through a bit of a confidence crisis, and that is, at that point in your life, it's okay. You're going to be okay. It's going to pass. It will change. There are things that you can do to help and get help your hormones be more balanced and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's not because you're suddenly not a good rider, potentially. It might be because, like we were talking about, our hormones love playing tricks on us and telling us that the world is ending and everything's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to mention in terms of getting into riding when you're older is you will almost certainly need to do some amount of strengthening your body not on the horse.
Yes. Your horse is not your gym, as Maeve would say.
And that's really valuable too, because you're probably going to have a way more fun if you're fit enough.
Yeah.
Because riding muscles are very different to all other muscles, and it's important that you not only condition yourself to ride, but you condition yourself to be fit enough to be able to then ride. That was just one of the things I wanted to mention. But in terms of like getting into horses when you're a bit older, was there anything else that you wanted to pick up on?
Well, the only other thing that occurred to me was if you're looking for a part loan, you are probably, I mean, I don't know this to be scientifically true, but I've seen it, generally speaking, you're more likely to find a horse autumn going into winter than you are spring coming into summer, because owners tend to need help in the winter financially because it's more expensive, feed, bedding, but also because of the clocks changing and darker nights, etc. People often find it harder to exercise their horses autumn, winter, and also it's not as fun because the weather's not very good. So you tend to find people looking for help, especially school. People go back to school, children, all the things. Tend to find more horses usually to part loan in the winter versus the summer when everyone's wanting to be out and about with their horses a bit more. So it's worth keeping an eye on. I'm not saying wait for half a year, but you know, you might find it a bit easier towards the end of summer.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That probably leads us quite nicely onto this like little mini topic that we had, because we realised that maybe talking about loaning horses wasn't like a whole topic, so we thought we would combine a couple together, essentially.
Older people, older horses.
Yeah. What a good segue. Love that. So I've made quite a few notes, and I've had a number of old horses. I think the reason that people wanted us to discuss this, well, you actually received a couple of questions on this. What was it that people wanted us to discuss, and maybe that will help guide the route into this?
Well, it was a comment on our Spotify, because you can leave comments on Spotify. And we've obviously done We've done podcasts about buying horses and young horses. And I think it was just thinking about the other end of the spectrum. So it was caring for the older horse. It was, you know, I guess it's maybe there's a little bit around when do you start slowing down with a horse? What kind of things do you look for? Because you see such debate on that. Of like, my horse is 24 and he's still doing XYZ, and other people will be like, let that horse retire. And then I guess retirement a bit. So go on.
Well, that's really interesting that you say that, because that is actually a really valid thing on its own. Because it's like they say with older people, when you stop walking, you will start getting a bit sick, basically. And that is the same for horses. So in the wild, horses would be roaming a long, long way. And normally in the wild, horses will pass away from their teeth being overgrown because they can't eat anymore, rather than other, you know, that's basically the main cause of death, essentially, at that later stage in life. But the thing that would keep horses going in the human environment is movement. So if you have an older horse, but they are looking like they maybe need to slow down, I don't mean speed up, but I don't mean stop.
Yeah.
Because often when you stop, that is when you see a real decline, especially in a horse with compromise in its body. So like a horse with arthritis, for example, full retirement can be hard, because then if they're not getting enough movement because the arthritis makes them not want to move, then the cycle of decline takes place a little bit more quickly.
So I always thought with that, I was always like, but if your horse is out 24/7 and they have arthritis, like, surely that's fine. But I guess you're saying that it makes them not want to move as much. I don't know, I then feel, because I'm just like, oh, but then they're carrying you, is that mean? Like,
well, there's no, you don't necessarily have to ride a horse to be able to maintain their body. And I think that, like, the love after riding is so important.
I feel very strongly about this.
I bet you do. And I think that I read something a long time ago, and it said, like, you've really got to fall in love with just being able to walk next to your horse. And that being enough. And especially when it comes to things like rehab, like, you've got to be okay with not riding them to be able to help them. And I think that is a struggle sometimes. And when you have older horses that are... Yeah, go on. No, go on.
There's a really, really cute pony on my yard who... We often don't have retired horses on our yard because obviously it's... A lot of people are training and coaching. But he's somebody's childhood pony. And he lives the life of luxury, and he's obviously not out all the time. I don't think that doesn't suit him. But they come up, and I see them at least every weekend. I think they come up in the week as well. I just don't see them because of my schedule. And they groom him, and they bath him, and they brush him, and he's just the cutest man ever. And it brings me so much joy to see him living that life, because I keep seeing adverts at the moment for like 24, 25-year-old ponies who have just been amazing. And the owners are like, he's been so great. He's still got another X years in him. And I understand that there's definitely a room for these older ponies to go and teach younger riders. But at 24, do you not... Maybe I'm being judgy. I'm like, do you not feel that
I don't think so. Because I Googled this to make sure that I was factually correct. But horses live between 25 and 30 years. And when a pony, like, they have, like a riding school pony, for example, you know, or a pony like a children's pony, they put up with a lot of shit.
Yeah, they really do.
And, like, you know, I'm with you. I do think that they deserve the retirement that they earned, really. You know, that is work. That is a level of work, and they have a compassion, and they have a... you know, a big heart and a generosity, and it's in us to give them that generosity back. Just because you can't ride anymore doesn't mean you shouldn't, you know, still support them and love them and guide and help them like that person does with their pony. I think that's sadly quite rare, but really lovely. Even if they haven't earned it, I hate that. Like, I don't hate that phrase, but like, I remember when Woody came home, I was like, no, from the moment he's off the lorry, he's mine. Like, it doesn't matter. And I feel very strongly about that. But you've had a few that you've retired, so did you have different reasons for, like, when you retired them? And so I bought a mare. She was 15, and bought for a lot of money, and sadly she was already not good in her body. And I was only 16, 17, and I didn't know better. And I didn't know that horses were medicated. I didn't know about, you know, that sort of maintenance of sport horses, I guess. And so I you know, started riding her, and I was based on someone's yard, and they were the agent as such in the purchase, and they basically screwed me over, essentially. And so we spent a lot of money, and then she was stopping a lot and was very, very stressed, and it was really bad, and she shattered my confidence alongside not feeling good in herself. And so and then the guy whose yard I was on then serendipitously just evacuated the situation and went and got a job somewhere. And I was like, right, great, this is cool. So I tried putting her in foal. That didn't work. She got neglected by the stud that she went to. She came back in such a bad state, like horrific. And then I like mended her a bit and got her going, and actually did have some success with her. I think the rest potentially healed some stuff in her. But then it was when I was working and I was self-employed and I had to fund everything myself, and I was, you know, early 20s, and I got to the point where I was like, I'm doing a lot to keep her going for not a huge amount of, like, who's it for? Is this for me, or is this because she feels good and it's good for her? And so I made the decision at that point to retire her, basically fully retire her. And she became my nanny, basically. I needed she was essentially like a companion. She kept a friend's other old horse company, and they lived together for a long time, and that was lovely. And they like lived together with another one, and if I had a training livery that needed a companion, that was what she did. And so she had a role, definitely, but it wasn't the same. And she was fully retired at that point. I wasn't still riding her. And yeah, she lived a really good life. She lived till she was 20, I think she was 27 actually. Which is really cool. She died of colic in the end. Well, I had her put to sleep, but it was colic that was the thing that made my decision for me. And she had a really good life, and she never looked old as such. She always looked well in her body. And then the winter before she got colic, she didn't look as great. And I think that, that obviously it's a very difficult thing having old horses, but I wanted to talk a bit maybe about like what you can do to help old horses. Because like you're saying, like just stopping is sometimes what is necessary, and Nanette coped really well with that, even though she probably did have stuff going on in her body. But things
every time she comes up, because her name's Nanette, I can only ever picture her as the nanny, like the Nanny McPhee. And because I only ever knew her as an old lady, I'm just like, this is who she was always meant to be,
Yeah, and she never got to have a baby. And I think that they knew that when I bought her, because she'd been a very good jumping horse for the people that I'd bought her from, and I'm almost certain that they had tried to breed from her and failed. She's got something called chronic endometriitis or osis. Well, endometriosis is the one that humans get, right?
Yeah.
It's different in horses. They get something called endometriitis. It must be the opposite. It means that basically, well, so they say, it doesn't cause pain all the time like it does in humans. But it is an ulceration of the womb lining, which makes it an inhospitable environment for a foal.
Bless her.
Turns out, my older mare, Mo, who I still have, had the same thing.
Oh, wow.
So that's why she had her foal, and she came early and didn't survive. Oh, honestly, what luck I've had. Back to what you can do about old horses. I'll just give you a whistle-stop tour of my best advice.
Yeah, go on.
Make sure that they're fed accordingly. That is super, super important. And that doesn't mean you have to feed them like a veteran mix. I actually probably wouldn't recommend that. I think they're full of loads of ingredients and they're quite complicated to digest. So my suggestion is something like Fibre Beat is a brilliant one. So making sure they're getting enough fat, fibre and protein. And then minerals. And then you're pretty much set. And they will need more food as they get older because their teeth do, like I said, it's the thing that gets them. So making sure that they have regular dentistry is super important. So all of my own horses, when they're in working age, will see the dentist every 6 months. When they're like from 3 to 6, and then from maybe 7, and then from 7 onwards they see the dentist every 9 months. I'm not a yearly kind of gal. That doesn't feel right to me. I'd rather they had less done more regularly than waiting a whole year and then becoming sore and then having something done. And then as they get older, you may get to being able to them have a year at some point, like if they're 17, 18 and they're just retired or whatever it might be, then a year's gap would be okay. But then as they get older again, you then shorten the gap potentially. So they're just being checked more regularly because things like slab fractures, fistulas, which is like a hole, or they get gaps in their teeth, or Nanette had something called EORTH, where basically the gums recede and then they get food stuck between their teeth. So she needed that to be regularly looked after. So that was one thing. One more time?
Farriery?
Yeah,
so how do you do that?
We say that again.
No, sorry, I was just excited. I was waiting for the answer.
Oh. So all of my own horses have their feet trimmed every 5 weeks.
Oh, even the retired ones?
Even the retired ones. And
because that's a debate often at retirement livery, which we'll get onto.
Yeah. I had a horse come to me recently that had been on retirement livery, and she was like, "Oh, I haven't received a bill for the farrier since October." It was January. Oh,
4 times a year.
Really?
When I looked at packages for Woody, and we can get into this because I really fundamentally believe that retirement doesn't look one way. A lot of the ones that I looked at where the horse was like, you kind of left them to it. It was like farriery 4 times a year or trims 4 times a year.
So what, that's every 12
worming.
weeks?
Again, with the maths.
Must be. Because that's every 3 months. And there's 4 quarters in a month.
Yeah, it was not a lot.
A
Yeah. And then it was like worming and the kind of basics, but dentistry, I guess once. I can't really remember.
Wow. So I treat all of my horses the same, and maybe that's why. Well, I guess, yeah, they're different. That's different, I suppose. I have maybe a different ethos to what retirement looks like. I guess I don't feel like it should change that much.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because obviously before Woody, you probably heard that on one of our previous podcasts, but we thought we were going to retire Woody from work, and it came as a bit of a shock, and so. And he was only 10, so I was sort of like, okay, well, I looked at several places. The first place I looked was like huge field, acres and acres, the horses just go out, but you couldn't go into the herd and like visit them because they were very much of the opinion that like, this is the herd now, like you have to leave them to it, they live together and they're fine. But I knew that like that just wouldn't work for me. Like I didn't, like you couldn't take them out of the herd and give them a groom, for example. And I was like, I understand that that's the way you want to do it, it doesn't work for me. I looked at another place that was like, they're out all summer and then in the winter they live in these big cow barns and again, you can't really take them out. And I was like, that doesn't work for me. And then I looked at a couple of places and one of them actually, the one that I would have chosen had I been able to retire him, I felt so good about it. It was actually someone messaged me on Instagram and they were like, we never advertise, but we have a farm and it was local to me and they were like, if you want Woody, we have retired horses, come and have a look. And I thought, is this legit or is it like someone being a bit weird? And anyway, I pulled up at this farm and this lovely lady's mum came out of the farmhouse, instantly warm and lovely. And she was like, come and have a look at the fields. And you walked around the front of the farmhouse and they just kind of flowed away down a hill. And she was like, come and see the horses. And we went down to the gate and all the horses came up to the gate to see her. And she was like, I come and see them every evening. And you could tell that she was like, I give them, they all get a little treat and whatever. And they all were like happy to be there. It was obviously part of their routine. She wasn't just saying it. And she was sort of showing me around and she was like, we've got a school here, you could bring him out, give him a groom, he could still see the other horses, but you could spend time with him, you can come whenever you want. And I was like, this is it, this is the place. It just looked so beautiful and it was lovely. And like, I really like pictured him there. And I found it really hard after we lost him because on the weekends, I'd kind of set aside in my brain calendar time to go and see him in my head. And so I would be driving along sometimes and I would just see him in this field in my mind's eye on the weekends and I just found it really weird and horrible. But that was like what I wanted because I was like, okay, what does the transition from someone who has a horse on full livery to retirement livery look like? And I looked at DIY as well. So I just think there's lots of ways to do it that feel right for you. You can leave them alone and some people really believe in that and believe that they should be able to go back, quote unquote, to being horses. But I think for some people that's not for some horses as well. Some horses they love their owners and that's all they've ever known. And they say most horses will just cope with going back to like not having that contact. But sometimes doesn't feel right for your relationship. And I think that's okay.
Are those horses being given a choice if they didn't like it?
Well, I guess that because the response is always, but they just go back to being wild or whatever, which I don't know.
I don't think you can say that. That, if you look at rewilding zoo animals.
Right.
Nope.
Yeah.
Not a thing. The ones that they reintegrate are like kept wild.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think we can't... there's a bit of an ethical thing in that for me. Like,
well, there's also some retirement liveries where the owners aren't there every day, but the owner of the retirement livery sees the horses and checks them and does all. So like it depends, but I just feel like, and there are some people who will listen to this and be like, yeah, but after 6 months you'd stop visiting, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe you would. I don't know.
I've had a lot of clients that had horses with me and then had retired horses elsewhere, and it's not the most straightforward thing. And I do think that this, being involved in it is important.
Yeah.
There was a not good scandal that went on at a retirement livery somewhere not that far away from me. Horses ending up in a really bad state, and because people they're trusting that place is going to be caring for them. They're not visiting that often, and then things get missed, and then and then you end up with, sad situations, and that's. I think it comes back down to responsibility, like whether you're paying for it. I do think having some involvement is still important, because
I know people
no one's gonna
visit every month or whatever, and
no one's gonna love your horse like you love them.
I agree.
It's complicated. I definitely think it's hard. Yeah.
With your owners, how do you make that final decision? Because like with Woody, it was very black and white. It was like, we'd had such a long process. It was very easy to say, okay, we're retiring from ridden life. But when they're older, it's not like one day you're suddenly like, they are retiring ready. They don't get a sign above their head,
We have one of the girls who works for me, her pony is with us, and he's 20, and he was not doing very much work, and she was intermittently hacking him out and doing
it's like semi-retired-ish.
Yeah. And then the weather got worse and he needed to put on a bit more condition. So she stepped right back and went, okay, I'm not going to ride him for a while.
So it's kind of natural.
Right. And then the interesting thing is he bloomed not being ridden.
Oh.
So then it was quite an easy decision for her, because she was like, okay, evidently being ridden was slightly holding him in a difficult place in his body. He actually is a very complicated pony. He has, it's not actually scoliosis, because scoliosis, I believe, is side to side bend, but he has like the opposite of a lordosis. I don't know what it's called, but like a bump.
That is. Oh.
But his spine goes kind of up and slightly to the side. Oh. He was kept in a shipping container at one point in his life. Poor little bugger.
Jeez.
Yeah, on a DIY yard. That was like the given stable. Terrifying.
Wow.
So he's had a fair life. And, her and I have discussed it a lot. And I've said, if it feels right and he's doing better when you're not riding, I think he's kind of shown you that decision. For me, a lot of it is because I have a lot of horses to ride, and the reality of having horses in work that are just hacking, for example, I make that decision because I'm like, I think I'm keeping this horse in work more for me than for them. But I am in a very fortunate position where I have loads of land and I can just put them on that land. But I would love one day to have a barn where I can then let my Mo, who is older, come in during the winter if she would like to, during the day or in the night, and have a big barn where she's still moving around loads, but she can kind of be a bit more loved again, because we see them every day, twice a day. They're literally just over the road. I go and hang out with them every now and then, but I don't get to spend as much time with her as I would like, because she was my best friend for I've had her since I was same time I got Nanette. She was 5 years old when I bought her. She's 21 now, 20 now.
Oh, I love that so much.
I've owned her for 15 years. I just want to go hang with her. I just want to go and brush her. And like, I go out to the field and I just scratch her, and she lifts her leg up and I scratch her boobs, and she thinks it's the best thing ever. And, you know, getting that is really rare. And I know that that's, you know, an emotional thing, because I know that you didn't get to have that with Woody. And I think, yeah, getting to have a horse into its old age and seeing them mature in this lovely way, and getting to give them that life of just being a horse without us riding them, or you know, needing something from them. Like, God, that's a magical thing.
Yeah. Someone commented when I but I shared that I was retiring Woody. Somebody commented on my post and was like, I wish I'd had the chance to do that with my horse. Retirement is a gift. And at the time, I was like, what? I was like, doesn't feel like a gift at all. This feels like an awful end to a horrible year. And then obviously a few months later, I was in the same position that she was, and I felt I knew exactly what she meant. That like, if you have the chance to retire your horse, it is a gift. Yeah. Yeah. I always think about old Harley Babe, and I'm like, if he makes it to 30, I'll be 60, so we can be like a little bit older together. Not that 60's old, but you know.
Yeah, definitely. But slowing down a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a couple of things that I wrote down as well, like rugging older horses.
Yeah,
really upsets me when I see horses just roughed off in the field.
Oh, I thought you were going to say over-rugged, but you mean the opposite.
No, because so Nanette, when she got much older, like, she needed more rugs. She felt the cold more because she had a little bit less muscle. So when you have less muscle, you have less opportunity to keep yourself warm, basically. There is some scientific thing to it. My brain's fallen out my ears because it's late. And so, you know, that's another thing with retirement livery, is it's difficult because, like, today, for example, it was cold this morning, so the horses had their rugs left on. 12 o'clock, we went and took their rugs off. They had their rugs off for 4 hours, and they had them back on again at 4:30, ready for the night, and that was that.
Yeah.
I actually just burped. I hope Amy cuts this out. If not, I've just been outed on the internet for burping on a podcast, but whatever.
She's definitely going to leave it in now.
100%. Only a human being, who cares? But like, that's not that easy to do. That takes quite a lot of work, and I'm in a fortunate position that I have staff that I can say, Lucy, I'm going to get on this horse, you go and do that, and then come back, and then come and do the groundwork with that one next, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas that's difficult, but I want that to be the case, because
go on.
Yeah, because I don't want to have to leave them getting colder or having to be tougher or whatever, because as they get older, or like Dee Dee, my 5-year-old, who's, well, 6-year-old thoroughbred, she's feeble. She doesn't grow a really thick coat, you know, so if I was leaving her to it, she'd look like shit. And then that'd be really expensive, and I'd have to feed her tons and tons and tons.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and they have field shelters, and we give them hay. You know, it's not like they're just surviving. But, yeah, I don't know. I feel quite passionately, especially about young horses too. It's okay to put rugs on them. You don't have to make them tough, because they're probably going to get rain scald anyway. I'm getting a bit rogue, because I think it's my dinner time, but there we are.
Well, I just had kind of one final question, which is like, because I often think about what the retirement I would have given Woody, and there was so much conflicting advice on like whether or not it's okay, quote unquote, to retire a horse, put them full time in a field, but then bring them in occasionally for like a groom or like I don't know, a bath or whatever. Because on the one hand, I was like, well, that's a nice way for me to connect with my horse, thank them for everything, and just have a nice time. But equally, people are like, well, they've learned to live in that herd now, and you shouldn't separate the herd. And also, if you're grooming, you're removing the oils from their coat, and you shouldn't mess with it. And da 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 da. So Miri's already shaking her head. What's your opinion on that?
Horses love humans, and if you want to go and spend some time with your horse, then please go and spend some time with your horse. That if my horses lived in my garden, after I did this, I'd probably be going out and giving Mo a boob scratch and a carrot. Yeah. And I would care for them. I would care for them if I could, as much as I care for Zora, who I ride all the time. But I think it's quite an old-fashioned mentality, the one that you were given, because yes, horses need to be horses and it's good for them, and obviously if you were in a situation where they were in a big herd and then you were taking them away on their own and they were really bloody stressed and it was, you know, yeah, okay, fine, that's probably not great, but that's not great for any horse to be taking them out of a herd and putting them in a stressful situation, regardless of whether they're bloody retired or not. So, you know, in that situation I'd be saying, okay, well, can you go and feed them a small, you know, give them a lick or something outside the field and groom them just on the other side of the fence, so you're safe, so they're safe, but you're still spending that nice time with them, you know. One of the yards I used to work at, big yard, they, you know, I'm talking like top of the sport show jumpers, they have lovely retirement, and they always gave their horses really good retirement, and that was where I really learnt a huge amount about young horses. And I saw the other day on their social media that they brought these 2 old boys in, and I'm talking old, like 20 something, and they'd given them both a haircut to help them with the warm weather, like they'd given them a proper clip. And I thought, God, that's valued. Those horses are loved. They will be loved until the day that they go, even though they were, you know, these are proper show jumpers, you know, like you know, they'd be selling horses, they make profit from horses, that kind of thing. But I thought, yeah, good, nice, I love that. Like, they have value, they still have value, definitely. And I guess that brings us onto our sponsor for this podcast, a good moment to mention about Redwings, because what a wonderful job they do in caring for those horses that maybe don't get the loving that we're talking about right now. Those, you know, the horses that are neglected or left in a difficult position. And there are a number of ways that you can support Redwings. You can donate. Any small donation will help. Add gift aid. It's always a good thing to do if you can. But also just spreading the awareness for sanctuaries like this. They have sanctuaries you can visit, right? Is that all of them that you can visit? Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
So you could
Ada Cole is the biggest one in Essex, so that's for the big day out if you want it. But there's also ones.
But that would be such a lovely thing to do, to go and support. You know, as a horsey person, a horsey day out could be to go. I don't think I couldn't go without bringing something home. When we go and visit Rhi, I'm going to have to take my horse box because I'm going to have to adopt a pony or a
Oh my
donkey.
gosh, I would love that.
George and I have already talked about it. We would like a donkey badly.
Can donkeys... This is a silly question. Can donkeys live with horses, or do they need another donkey?
I know that they can live with horses, but maybe they do need another donkey. I don't know, because I told you that story, didn't I, about John Whittaker's donkey that they put on Instagram. Did I tell you that? It was this hilarious video. I think her name's like Doris or something, the donkey. And there was a hilarious video of her cantering around the indoor arena with their young horses, where they were just seeing them move, and like they'd obviously got them in for worming or something, and they were seeing them go around, and there was like a jump in the middle that they weren't encouraging these young horses to go over, but Doris the donkey was like coming around cantering over this jump in the middle, absolutely hilarious, going at the same time. It's the funniest video. I'm gonna have to put it on my Instagram now because it was such comedic value. But what a moment.
Redwings put up a video of their donkeys going into their summer paddocks the other day, and they were all so excited. They were braying a lot. I'll put the video in the show notes.
Isn't it funny that they just make noises like that? I just think that's just fantastic. I've got a cockerel in my garden at the moment, but maybe if one day I get a donkey, the neighbours are going to be like, what?
Cute.
Oh, I love that. That is so magical, isn't it? I do love a donkey. Oh, one more thing about donkeys. Did you know that they're fight animals, not flight animals?
You did. You've brought this up on a podcast before.
Oh, sorry.
You're a real donkey maniac. Yeah.
One more. I've got one more fun fact. The oldest horse that has ever lived. I wanted to just finish on this absolutely rogue bit of information.
Yeah, go on.
The oldest horse ever recorded was a Shire stallion named Old Billy. Now, how valuable this information is, I don't know. He lived from 1760 to 1822, reaching the age of 62. He was known for his work pulling barges on the River Mersey. The head... Oh my God, this is a bit weird. The head of Old Billy was returned to his hometown of Warrington, England, after being displayed at Bedford Museum.
Oh.
How bizarre.
God, that's surprise. 60. You said 62.
62.
That's a very old horse. And also surprising, because the whole old wives' tale, or maybe not old wives' tale, is that bigger horses do not live as long.
I wonder if it's because he stayed in work.
Maybe, but God, I hope he wasn't pulling barges when he was like 55.
Oh.
That's a lot, isn't it?
That's a
Poor
lot.
Billy.
Poor old Billy.
What a moment to end on. Thanks for that.
What a moment to end
Tell
on.
us how old, if you have old horses, will you tell us how old they are? And we'll read them out in the next episode.
Not me, everyone else. Please, send us in. We'd love to hear that. Interesting. We've covered a plethora of topics today. It's a good word, isn't it? Plethora.
It is.
I
think we'll end it there before Miri brings more birds and donkeys into the mix.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. We will see you for next time. Goodbye.
See you next week. Bye.